What's up guys, it's Mike Thurston here, and today's video is all about back training and the top 5 back exercises I would choose if I could only pick 5. Now, these are not the best 5 exercises to do full stop, this is just a personal preference. I use a whole host of back exercises when it comes to training my back in order to achieve that 3D proportional wide thick back. Now I've strategically chosen 5 different exercises which are going to hit my back in different ways, okay? So I've got 1 which is going to hit my back from an overhead vertical plane of motion. I've got 2 from a horizontal pulling motion. I've got 1 which is kind of a pulling down, pull over motion. And then the last one, which is a static hold, where I'm just going to be pulling where everything is in a fixed position, well, my upper body, apart from my hips. Now, the first exercise, this is in no particular order in which one's the best. This is just the order in which I did them in my routine, okay? First one, bent over barbell row. You can't argue this is a very solid compound movement which is not only going to build your back, but it's going to help build and strengthen your core as well at the same time. One of the reasons why I like it so much, there's so many different variations you can apply to this exercise in order to target different areas of your back and recruit different muscle fibers. So you have the option of changing up the grip positioning. You could have a closer grip, or you could go for a wider grip. You could go for a pronated grip, you could also go for a supinated grip. Now, there's no perfect way to do it. I would just suggest that you mix it up from time to time. From my personal reflection upon doing this exercise, I do find that doing a supinated grip will work a little bit more on my forearms and targets slightly lower down on my lats, which is good to do from time to time. And I also found that doing the pronated grip will work a little bit more of my mid and upper back, but it can vary. A lot of the time it depends upon the weight in which I'm using. Sometimes I'll do this with a slow, controlled tempo with a lighter weight, and I really hold the contractions at the top. Sometimes I'll do it with a little bit heavier weight, where the action's a little bit more jerky. It's a little bit harder to stabilize your torso positioning and reduce momentum, but it's not to say it's not effective. You also got the option to perform this exercise with a bench support. I'd often advise people with a weaker back to do this, and sometimes I feel as though I can lift a little bit heavier weight because I have that support. I'm not relying upon my core to keep myself in that strict position. It's completely going to isolate my back, which sometimes will allow me to lift heavier. Now, the next exercise I would select would be the lat pull down. I feel as though this is one of the best exercises you could choose in order to target your lats from a vertical plane or vertical pulling plane of motion, okay? One of the other reasons why I like this exercise so much is because, like the bent over row, with the lat pull down, there's so many different variations you can use in order to target your back. You can change the angle of your torso slightly to recruit different muscle fibers. You can change up your grip. You go for a really wide grip, you go for a little bit of a closer grip, and you can also use a whole host of different cable attachments. Now, I'll go into these variations in a little bit more detail. If you keep your back completely upright, you are going to target your lats a lot more compared to, say for example, if you're going to pull the weight down and your torso's about 45 degrees. If it's about 45 degrees or you are leaning back, you are going to recruit more of your upper back than purely isolating the lat. Now, I would say that the wide grip is my absolute favorite, but it's not to say I wouldn't change it up from time to time. I feel as though the reverse grip or the close grip pull can also be extremely effective, particularly if you want to target different areas of the back. I'm not saying one is superior to the other, but yes, I would change it from time to time. But just make sure that you don't over-engage the biceps, because I feel as though it's very easy to do with the close grip pull. Now, the next exercise I would move on to is the notorious one-arm dumbbell row. This one is extremely effective at building the lats. However, it's a little bit more difficult to perform, I would say. So for those people who are struggling to feel the pinch in the lat, you have to practice, okay? I was doing this wrong for the first 2 to 3 years of training until I fully mastered it. The reason why I like this so much is because I feel as if this is one of the exercises where you can really get a squeeze. You get much more of a squeeze compared to a lot of other back exercises. Now, there's a number of different variations you can do in order to execute this exercise, and a lot of it has to do with where you position your torso. So you can do this one-arm dumbbell row on a bench. You could do it on a slight decline bench. You could even do it standing. Again, I would change it up from time to time, but I do feel as though if you have your knee resting upon something, it allows you to keep your body stable and really focus the tension and the weight onto the lat muscle. Now, over the past few years when I've been personal training clients, a lot of people who, they're beginners or they struggle to engage the lat and to get that shoulder retraction, they often don't pick it up very quickly when they do a bent over a dumbbell row, if they're kind of leaning forward and trying to do it. But if they do it upright, doing a seated cable one arm pull, they learn how to do it much quicker in comparison, okay? So I would probably perform this exercise or do both of them at the same time to really engage your lat and to learn how to do the movement properly before you begin to really overload the muscles doing the one arm dumbbell row. Now, going into more detail about how to execute this exercise properly, I would click on this link. I think I talk about how to do it for about 6 to 8 minutes, so make sure you don't miss that. The next exercise I'd go on to is the standing lat pull down or the push down. I don't know the exact name for it, but the reason why I like it so much is because it has that pull over motion, which is, again, you're targeting the back from a different range of motion. So you're not pulling the weight towards you, you're pulling down and driving your elbows back. Now, when you're executing this exercise, there's a number of different variations you can do. I'm talking about the grip here. You could use a pronated grip, a reverse grip, or you could even use the rope attachment instead. But it's the same kind of thing which you're doing. Now, when doing it, you want to ensure that as you pull down, you keep your elbows fixed. There should be no flexing at the elbows because you're just going to over-engage your biceps. You want to strictly focus on your back here. So starting off with this movement, I would take a step back and I would lean forward ever so slightly. Initiate the movement first by pulling the cable down with your hands, and then once you've reached halfway through the motion, you really want to focus on pulling your shoulders back and pushing your chest out. You need that retraction in your shoulders in order to engage your back. Then what I do when I'm doing this exercise, I would focus on trying to rip my hands apart and pushing the weight down. So I'm not pulling the weight towards my hips, I'm actually pulling it down to the floor. So by pulling down to the floor and pulling apart, I'm getting the greatest engagement possible with my back. But like I said before, you have to make sure that you keep those shoulders back and push your chest out at the bottom of the movement and squeeze the contraction as hard as you possibly can. If you don't feel it in the back, you probably need to lower the weight and work on your form. When doing this exercise, it's not something I would start off with. It's probably something I would do near the end of my workout for higher reps, or I'll probably superset it with something else. I'll really drive blood into the muscle and get a serious pump with it. The next exercise I'd move on to would be the rack deadlift or the rack pull. Now, this exercise is very similar to traditional deadlift or bent knee deadlift, but you're basically performing the top half of the movement. So what it does is you're basically reducing how much of your lower body you're going to be engaging. You're strictly going to isolate your upper body or your back. Now, as you're only going to be doing the top half of the deadlift, you're going to be working your lower body much less. That's not to say you're going to completely isolate your lower body from working. You are going to get a bit of glute stimulation occurring, but you're definitely not going to be working your lower body as much as you would do doing a traditional deadlift. Now, when performing this exercise, the key is to hold yourself in a fixed position. So you're almost doing a constant lat spread. You're pulling your shoulders back, you're pushing your chest out, and you're contracting your lats. Now, with hand positioning, I'd usually place my little fingers on that strip of the barbell. I don't want my hands too wide, I don't want them too narrow. So I'd initiate this movement, I'd keep my back completely straight and fixed, and I'd begin by just pulling the weight towards me. Now, if you have the intention of thrusting forward, you are going to engage more of your glutes when you perform this. If you try and think of just pulling the weight, you're going to engage your glutes a lot less, but you will place more of the tension on your mid and lower back. So it's completely up to you and what muscles you're trying to target here. With me, I don't really want to work my glutes, I want to work my entire back. So I'm thinking more about pulling the weight towards me. So as always, my entire back is fixed, and I'm going to pull the weight up and pause slightly at the top. Now, as I lower the weight down, I'm keeping my shoulders as far back as possible. I don't want to let my shoulders creep forward. If you let your shoulders slacken and creep forward, when you pull back up, you're going to place way more of the tension on your lower back, which could potentially be a little bit dangerous. So you want to evenly spread the tension on your entire back and keep your form strict, chest out, shoulders back the entire time. So at the top of the rep, if you need to readjust, just readjust, take a second to pull your shoulders back and pop your chest out before you go back down again. So those are the top 5 exercises I would choose. You might be thinking, Mike, well, why have you not included the pull-up? Or why have you not included deadlift? Or why have you not included seated cable pull? I have my reasons, but I'll tell you why. When it comes to doing a chin-up, whether it be a wide grip pull-up or a close grip chin-up or reverse grip, I feel as though, although it is an extremely effective exercise, it does over-engage the bicep a little bit. I don't think it isolates the back as well as it could do, and I think for most people who perform it, they simply just don't know how to do it properly. They don't have that ability to retract the shoulders and engage the back the way they could do if they practice a little bit more. Still do the exercise, but make sure you do it properly. I do feel as though if you're thinking just purely isolating the back, there's probably better alternatives to go for. Now, deadlifts are an extremely effective exercise. I'm not saying they're not, but for me personally, I don't do them that often because I have a very overdeveloped lower back. Almost looks like an alien. I don't want it to get any bigger. Plus, my hips and my waist is pretty thick as it is, so I'm trying to keep a proportionate look. I want to keep my waist, tight. I don't want to build it thicker, as it were, so I've left that one out. When building your back, you have a whole host of exercises which you can use, and I recommend you do use, okay? So I'm not saying, like I said before, these are the only 5 you should stick to. There's loads you should go for, but these are the 5 I would choose if I could only pick 5. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.